And welcome to the Trade Show Guy Monday Morning Coffee. It is September 18th, 2017. I'm Tim Patterson, Trade Show Guy, author of Trade Show Success, 14 Proven Steps to Take Your Trade Show Marketing to the Next Level. I also blog at tradeshowguyblog.com. I got a small project management exhibit company here in Oregon called Trade Show Guy Exhibits. Now, this week on Trade Show Guy Monday Morning Coffee, one of my favorite topics, which is 3D exhibit design. Now, I'm not a designer, nor do I pretend to be one or act like one on TV. It's a bit of a stretch, to talk in depth about 3D exhibit design for long. I can probably say a couple of neat phrases, but I love to see what designers come up with during, using very limited constraints of space and often very limited pricing constraints as well. So for this week's interview, I wanted to talk with a pro. So I talked with Katina Regal-Zapay, who is a designer with Classic Exhibits in Portland, Oregon. Her experience in 3D exhibit design is wide and deep and varied, and it was a fun and illuminating conversation. So we're talking with Katina Regal-Zapay, who is with Classic Exhibits, one of the staff designers there. And we thought it would be fun to talk about how Katina approaches design. She's been doing this for a decade now as 3D exhibit designer and came from a design background. So good morning, or hello, Katina. Nice to see you.
Hello, Tim.
And we've got your screen up here, so we'll probably just look at your screen for the most part. You've got a nice design. Is this an island booth that you've got pulled up here?
This is an island booth. It's a 20 by 40 island. And yeah, let me just dive right in because I brought together some really fun images today that exemplify sort of the creativity you can accomplish within a confined space when you have a really strong brand or a message or a theme that you need to carry out. And this is one of my favorite designs that I did for Petronash. And basically, what you got to do as a designer right off the bat is just get into the brand, whether they have a website or branding guidelines or images or whatever their message is or their product is that they sell or their service that they offer. You just really have to delve in and figure out what it is, what it's all about, and start thinking about how to portray that in a 3D space.
That's probably one of your biggest challenges, really, is to get that brand so that people recognize it in an instant. That's when they're walking by with hundreds, if not thousands, of other booths on the floor. So that seems to be your primary objective, and then everything kind of falls in under that, whether it's function, whether it's what they need for monitors and this and that. So yeah, please walk us through.
Right. They definitely want to differentiate themselves from the other people around them at the show hall and just project an image. There's obviously going to be functional things that the booth needs to accomplish, but in my mind, the feeling that people get from that first look at the space is so paramount, so important, because people that's going to be the lasting impression, that first impression, like they've always said. It's so important. And that's what people are going to remember, really. And additionally, if people are able to walk through the space and have good experiences that are memorable and involve their different senses as they walk through, it's going to just resonate that much more with them. That impression is going to last longer.
So you dig into this on using a 3D computer program to render this. It's CAD, whatever you call it. I'm not sure exactly what program. It doesn't really matter which program it is. But you look at it from so many different angles in 3D form to build this out so that you can see it and check spaces and traffic flow and that sort of thing. I would guess.
Right. For instance, so the physical requirements of this booth where they needed some high signage, they actually, in this instance, they had to have all that height in the sort of split down on one side of the booth. It was a 20 by 40, but it was only on the 10-foot section of that 40-foot long space that they could have the high signage. It just the particular show regulations of this booth. They needed to have a large meeting area, which was behind these doors with the archway. Obviously, the shapes, all the arcs and the curves were heavily drawn from their logo. That branding was was really something that I was able to play with for a lot of the different elements in the booth. And I don't want to get stuck on this one too long because there's so many other fun things. We've got, this was a 3D printer that wanted to have a new 40 by 40 space. And in this case, not that they had a lot of angles in their logo, but that was sort of a design element that was something that they were using a lot in their branding at the time. So we had a lot of angles and fun sort of leading lines that draw you in and sort of take you around the space. And we've got big things, we've got small things. I think you and I worked on this one together, Tim.
Yes.
And it really doesn't matter the size of the space. What we're trying to do is really encompass a brand within whatever the dimensions are that we're given. So this space was more like a 10 by 15 foot space, I believe. And, it had a very specific purpose. The Bob's Red Mill, they use these millstones, the type of architecture they use in their store and in their different properties is always this nice wood and a lot of the red color that's signature in their logo, and just the sort of rough hewn timber and the hardware that's really thick and chunky and just suggests really, good quality and value.
Yeah, and so once you see those building materials, it does resonate with everything else that you see about the brand, and that seems to me to be one of the biggest challenges that you have to nail that with a trade show booth.
Right. I'm just going to flip through a few more designs so you can see some of the different types of spaces that we're able to create with our 3D software. And what's so good about the 3D software is that it really does create fairly realistic images where people literally can envision themselves walking into the space and walking around and sitting in this conference room, and then the level of privacy that's going to be there with sort of a semi-sheer panel, and how much fun it's going to be to come in here and sit and watch this presentation that's going on in this space, under this cool, uniquely shaped archway.
And with the software, you can rotate the view to create a rendering from virtually any angle, so you can see it from the inside, from backside, from front side, from above, from from below, from a floor to a floor plan, from overhead. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
With all of these renderings that I'm showing you right now, when I produced the renderings for the presentation, it was more of a probably 5 to 10 renderings minimum of each booth size, because that really helps people to visualize the different ones. Sometimes with a smaller booth, you don't need as many views, but
right, and that's a very simple but striking back wall there that you have. With it looks like a 10 by 20, maybe a 10 by 30.
It's a 10 by 20, yes.
Right. Okay. Mm-hmm. With just a simple greeting counter, but the off angles doesn't look like there's a square angle in there almost.
No, yeah, it's all very angled and also backlit. These pieces are backlit. Yeah. So having those sort of unique shapes that really just push forward the logo and the shapes that you see in the name and in the logo mark the company, it really helps to emphasize the brand and helps people to remember it that much more.
There's a lot of curves there. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's fun. There's curves, there's angles, there's unique shapes, and some companies really have done a good job of coming up with unique shapes. I mean, this one wasn't as much about the shapes as much as the textures and the visual imagery that really helped to put through the branding message of this company.
And with the spaces you're given, 10 feet by 10 or 20 or 30, or even the islands, it's so constrained. But you have to find ways to put so much in there that still allows for the function of what the booth is, as well as the branding. So it's a unique challenge. There's a lot of other design projects that are out there, but the exhibit design, there's one of our projects there, the So Young project. Yes. So, which was an award winner. We could mention that.
Yes,
that was fun.
Very good.
We
love that one.
Yeah, we love it too, and the client as well with the closet and that sort of thing. So you got to figure out. So let's talk about some of the questions that you try to get answered before you actually sit down to design. You want to have a conversation with the client if at all possible. If not, you certainly want to have them chime in on some areas of what they need to answer. So what kind of questions do you want to ask? What kind of things do you need to know from them?
I have a really good comprehensive list of questions that I like to share with account executives or people like you whenever you're going out to talk to a client. I mean, you have so much experience. I'm sure you know these questions like the back of your hand. But there's some really good questions that really help designers, especially to come up with these designs that are going to be winners, that are going to knock it out of the park, that are going to fulfill all the requirements that the client has stated to you. So the first thing I usually ask for is who the client is, what the brand, if they have any branding guidelines, graphic files, or sometimes all we have to go on is a website, an online presence. Maybe their Instagram or their Facebook is stronger than their website. So we ask for that information because we like to see how the client presents themselves in a 2D format.
Right.
So that people can, actually walk around in it. I always like to know what the timeline is, when that booth is going to be needed, or that space is going to be needed, when it's going to debut. What size the booth needs to be. Sometimes there's just one size that's needed. Sometimes there's a few different configurations that's needed, and that's really important to know up front because we're going to design specific pieces. For instance, this design here is made of panels that can easily be reconfigured into inlines, islands. It can be a much larger island. It can be a 10 by 10. We just take fewer of the panels if we need it to be smaller. You know what I mean?
And that's a common goal, I would assume, because a lot of companies that are active in the trade show marketing world will do a couple of large expos, so they want an island, but they also do maybe a half a dozen or a dozen smaller shows throughout the year where they want only a 10-foot or a 20-foot. So you want to be able to use those same materials, and then that comes down to you've got to work with the fabrication folks so that they know that, okay, this is going to go out as a 10 by 10 as well as an island or whatever, so that those pieces are easy to grab and ship. So there's a lot of balls in the air for that. Yeah. So
no, and people, I mean, it's a significant investment. So it's totally understandable that people would want to be able to utilize it as much as possible and make good use of the properties that they're buying. And if we know that up front, we can really play to that strength and design pieces that are going to be easily reconfigurable to the specific sizes that the client needs. And also obviously the budget is always a fun topic.
Yes.
No one likes to talk about money, but it's really helpful for us to know what types of materials we can use, because we have materials that are on the lower end cost wise, and we have materials that are on the higher end, and we certainly don't want to sell anyone short if they want something that's on that higher end, and we certainly don't want to present something that is going to cost someone 5 times their annual budget. So if we know that ahead of time, we can really give them the best bang for their buck.
Yeah, I think my first boss in this industry said, don't show them something they can't afford. So if you know what they can afford, then you can create something that fits within their parameters. And the other thing that just came to mind is that I've had a number of clients that have had booths, and they've had them for 2-3 years. They've lived in them, and a number of shows. The show could be 2, 3, 4 days long. They learn how they function different, and they find out that over time their needs change, or they they use them differently. And so what used to be maybe a room, like a little client meeting room, actually became a hangout for the staffers, and they decide we don't need that because they need to go somewhere else to do that. We need that area for display products or handing out things.
Sure.
And so things change. And so I've always advised companies to, once they get it, they know what they want when they get it, but live in it. Figure out how it really works in the real world, because that may people change things, and you can make adjustments along the way without having to come up with a whole new booth either. So
I think it's totally normal for the needs and requirements to sort of evolve over time as people get more experience in the exhibit process. And I do like to ask people too, what worked or didn't work about their previous booths, because oftentimes they'll be like, well, I really liked this one seating area, but I really didn't like my closet, or I really didn't like having a hanging sign, or I do want a hanging sign, or that worked so well for me before, I absolutely have to have this type of item again. So it's always fun to hear what worked and didn't work for them before, because often that's a huge clue for us as designers, what's going to work for them this time. I like to ask them, are they looking for something similar or different? I like to ask if they're looking to purchase or rent the booth or a combination, because we have rental properties that we can use if their budget just can't handle a full purchase, at this time.
Yep.
Also, if they have any unusual dimensional restrictions, like the show regulations sometimes can be a little bit odd at certain shows, and it's good to know that up front if they have certain height restrictions or setback restrictions.
It's interesting. Yes, some shows you can put something up high in a shorter or smaller booth, and that you can't at another show just because of the way the show rules are written. So it's good to know as much as you can about that. Some things you cannot anticipate, but obviously the more you can anticipate, the better off everyone is.
Yeah. And with trade show properties, there really are so many different ways you can be flexible with how things are configured and how high they go or how far they come in from the setback on the floor. And so it's just good to know that up front, though, because then you can make sure that those flexible measures are implemented in the booth. And it's just always easier to plan for it up front than it is to retrofit.
Cool, Katina. Is there anything else that you want to share as far as what kind of things that they should bring to the table or think about prior to speaking with a designer such as yourself?
Yes. I had a few more things, and I'll try to wrap these up for you here pretty succinctly. I am asking a lot of times, what are the physical properties that the exhibit needs to have? Workstations, counters, flat wall, private meeting areas, semi-private storage. Does the client need to display lots of products? If they do, dimensions and specs for those are helpful. If they have any materials or construction methods they prefer or that they want to stay away from. Does the booth need to be portable and lightweight, or are they okay with packing it into crates? There's a huge discrepancy between what different exhibitors want to do there, and that makes a huge difference in the design. Do they want to use show labor or their own employees to set up the booth? Again, that's going to determine what types of systems and materials we use. And if they have any inspirational images of design elements they like, even if they aren't trade show related, those can be very helpful for design inspiration. If they have any descriptive words that they would use to describe their company and what they want visitors to feel about the company when they look at the space or enter into the space and experience something in that space. And last of all, I really like to remind people that I'm happy to be on phone calls with them and when they're talking to their client, and most designers are. Yes. And I know you like to utilize that function with us, Tim, because it's really good for the designer to hear firsthand, straight from the horse's mouth, what the client is looking for, rather than have it sort of relayed in a secondhand manner. It's very, very helpful. There's a huge advantage to that.
Gives you a chance to ask questions directly and clarify things. Yes, I would agree. So very cool.
Yeah.
Did I mention when we set this up that you could share one good thing?
I don't think you did.
Oh, no.
I shared about 10 good things here. I mean,
well, what I like to do on the podcast is wrap up the show with one good thing. Now, it could be a book you've read. It could be a place you've gone. It could be the last guest I had shared cigars. He liked cigars. Cigars were his one good thing that he wanted to share. Is there anything that comes to mind, like a recent movie or maybe a trip you and your family you took? Anything that you'd like to share, just to point out to people?
Just tell you something good, huh?
Anything that came to mind that's good.
Well, it was my daughter's first day of school yesterday, third grade, and she had a good day. So in my book, that's a good day for me too.
First days of school are always fun for the parents, if not for the kids. But Katina's been great.
It's so fun.
Yes, it is so fun. And you see them grow. Every year you go, oh, gosh, they're in that grade now. Oh, my goodness. Katina, it's a pleasure again. I appreciate your expertise sharing it here on the Trade Show Guy Monday Morning Coffee podcast. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks again to Katina at Classic Exhibits for taking some time to discuss 3D exhibit design. I hope you found something good to take away. This week's trade show tip comes from Classic Exhibits blog, Trade Show Tales. Trade shows are like first dates or first meetings or job interviews. As it says, unless you have an ego, I'm reading from the script here, from the article, unless you have an ego like Donald Trump, these first scare the bejesus out of you. They should, no matter how well you prepare. The unknowns trump the knowns by a ratio of about 10,000 to 1. If you've ever been on a blind date or even a first date with someone you've just met, you know that a date is about being the person you strive to be, not the person you are. So do your best to look good as much as you can and act that way too. That's the beginning of the article. Check the show notes for a link to the full article on how to treat a trade show like a first date. So this week's one good thing, Katina's one good thing, by the way, was the first day of third grade, as you may have heard, for her daughter. My one good thing this week is the coming of fall. I will say that every season is my favorite when the season rolls around, but I think fall really is my all-time favorite. Really my favorite. It harkens big changes, leaves change color in fall, winds pick up, temperatures drop, and that means ski season isn't far away. So fall begins in just a few days on September 22nd, so that's my one good thing this week, the coming of autumn. So hey, have a great week.